I'm here in studio with Nick Nanos, the founder and chief data scientist of Nanos Research, and now alongside us, Dan Moulton, who used to work with Kathleen Wynne and Dalton McGuinty, and of course now is with Crestview Strategy. I hope I'm saying that right. No prompter for me today. Dan, I'm going to start with you. You are super tied into a lot of people who make decisions in this government. What does it say to you that this decision was announced by Freeland today in the manner it was and took so many people by surprise?
Well, I think it's clear that she was trying to seize the narrative, right? I think it's clear she was trying to seize control of a story after being told she was no longer going to have her job on Friday afternoon, right? Those who were paying close attention on Friday would have noticed she was in a different, I think, state at her press conference on Friday afternoon. That press conference was
she got emotional.
She did. She got very emotional. It was delayed by some time. I understand because she was still in with the Prime Minister having what is clearly a very difficult conversation. And I understand she took the weekend to consider her future and what she was going to do next. She's obviously been one of the more loyal lieutenants in this government, right? She's been a loyal part of this cabinet over many years. And so this was clearly a difficult decision for her. But clearly the timing of it, clearly the drama that we're seeing unfold today here on Parliament Hill was intentional. I think she was looking to seize control of a story and put some distance between her and the Prime Minister as she was about to be fired. And I mean, that would have been a difficult place for her to have been politically for her future career. And this was a move this morning to seize control of the story. And I think she's done that very effectively.
And we can only speculate as to why, just to quickly follow up before I go to you, Nick, because that's the thing. She could have Sean Frasered it, right? And just said, you know what, my time's up. I'm going to head out. I still support this government. This is the opposite of that. The number of things in this resignation letter that she posted this morning, we found ourselves at odds about the best path forward for Canada. She calls, the use of political gimmicks. Mm-hmm. She uses language like that. She talks about the priority that should be placed on responding to the threat of tariffs and working with the premiers, kind of insinuating that isn't what the Prime Minister is doing. You mentioned how close she was to the Prime Minister, how loyal of a lieutenant that she has been. What might drive the desire to go out in this way?
Well, I think her advocates, people that are close to Chrystia Freeland, that would champion her cause, would probably say she had the bravery to do what Bill Morneau couldn't, right? I mean, he left quietly. She could have left quietly, and she did not. She is looking to seize control of the story here, to define her next chapter, to define how history will write her departure from this government. It could have been going quietly after being fired, and she's chosen for that not to be the way that she will leave this government. You point out her disagreements with the Prime Minister. Clearly, those are being brought into very public relief in a way that I think most finance ministers tend not to do. It's common for there to be distance and disagreement between finance ministers and prime ministers. Usually those are kept in private. She's decided to articulate those very publicly, and I think it is part of a strategy to seize control of how she's leaving this government and the story that will be told about her.
Dan makes the perfect reference to Bill Morneau, right? Who essentially the same reporting led to his departure, conflict over spending. It took him 2 years to write a book that eventually, not even in that mean of a way, talked about exactly what Chrystia Freeland decided to put on the public record this morning, the day she was going to table the fall economic statement.
But there's another bomb, Vashi, that we have not talked about. That's the deficit number. Mm-hmm. Right? She knows what the deficit number is, as does the Prime Minister. What's clear is that, as soon as this economic statement is out, it's probably likely that the key friction point was the fact that the deficit number was larger than anticipated. What she's done is, we could talk about the honorable thing and all that other kind of stuff, but what she's done now is distance herself from that decision, and she makes reference to that with the gimmicks and stuff like that, and now she gets to pin the deficit directly on Justin Trudeau. So, I think the next part of this story, we're talking about, what's going to happen in the next 24 hours. The next part of the story is how big will the deficit be? And Justin Trudeau, realistically, is going to end up taking full responsibility for this. It won't be the Department of Finance, and it won't be the former Minister of Finance. It'll be him that will have to kind of defend this.
So I was told the deficit is $61.9 billion, but that the way it's presented in the fall economic statement, which if we ever get to see today, we might not be today, shows kind of a 40 plus, and then on another page, essentially some land claim settlements that were more expensive, CERB money that they didn't get back, stuff that they're viewing as had to do, and so it's not necessarily overly transparent, but it would become very transparent tomorrow when public accounts were tabled. So essentially the deficit is bigger in all actuality than that $40 billion. So your framing is very, accurate.
If she didn't step down, then she'd be wearing it.
Yeah. What's so interesting is, though, Dan, last week she looked like she was preparing to be the person who had to wear it, insofar as the minister was getting all these questions from reporters at a couple of press conferences she held. Well, what about the fiscal anchors? And she put it, I can commit to this one, like this is the important one. That I want to be clear because it matters. We're going to stick to the debt to GDP ratio one. But it became pretty clear, I think, through her comments that she knew that they weren't going to hit the $40 billion and she was prepping to wear it. Is it the fact that she was going to get fired that essentially made the difference?
Well, I mean, that could only be it, right? I think the timing of this is all messy. I think, let's be real about this. It's confusing as to why the conversation was held on Friday, why they were planning a shuffle on Wednesday of this week with a fall economic statement planned for today. I think it was, it's clearly playing out in a pretty difficult way. What I will say is Nick makes a really great point about the deficit numbers and who's going to wear them. And I think there is a need now for the Prime Minister's office to seize control of a bunch of different elements of this narrative. One of them is who wears the deficit numbers and who wears the position that we are at from a fiscal standpoint. I think they'll probably be doing a lot of very deliberate continued leaking in national news stories and in the inside baseball conversations about whose fault that is and who should really wear that. But there are bigger moves they need to undertake. They need to look at, as you say, whether or not there's a fall economic statement even introduced today. And then I think the Prime Minister really needs to get out there and bring some message of stability. Whether or not that comes in the form of a prorogation, I think remains unclear. There's an obviously a lot of work underway right now as we speak to determine what the next steps are for this government. Prorogation is no doubt on the table. It would be a dramatic way for the Prime Minister, I think, to seize control right now, to plan a shuffle, to bring back the House in some time. It's not an easy feat. The Prime Minister has a limited number of options in terms of how he can create some stability in this moment, but he needs to do it, and he needs to do it fast.
That's a great point.
Yeah,
go for it.
Ask a question?
Yeah.
Please,
How does he put on a brave face?
Oh.
No, I'm just saying.
No,
you said,
he has no choice, I think.
I mean, he's
What
done it
else do
before,
you do?
though. I think the one thing I will say is that it will be very easy in this moment, Nick, to dramatize the position that we're in. Mm-hmm. He has been in very difficult places like this before. I remember being on TV with Vashi talking about different moments over the life of this government where he's been in really difficult positions, where cabinet ministers have resigned. And it was difficult when Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott resigned that dramatic day when we would have been on TV talking about a very similar set of circumstances and seen a future for the Prime Minister. Yeah. He's won 2 elections since then. Obviously, there's been a lot of time between now and then. I'll acknowledge that. But he can, I think, as a leader, put on a brave face. He can get out there and create some stability. He has a unique gift in that way, and he needs to do it, and he needs to do it fast.
Yeah, no, I agree. Obviously, he's very accomplished at what he does, but, I think for average Canadians, they look at a pattern of behavior. All these ministers, Jody Wilson-Raybould, Bill Morneau, you can just stack up the list, and I think for average Canadians, they'll see a pattern of behavior. And he's got to break that perception.
Sure.
And I think that's why Mark Carney is probably one of the lifelines that he has. Because right now, he desperately needs someone to step up to say that they support his leadership of the party.
Vision.
Right?
Yeah.
And that they think that he's the best person to lead the party. But if nobody steps forward, it's going to be tough.
And I think it's hard to understand why Carney would right now, right?
Well, it feels almost impossible to understand why you would associate yourself at this point. But if they are able to secure something like that, it is at least a message of something forward-looking at a time when people are going to be focused on the here and now.